Welcome to Linda's Corner. My name is Linda Bjork, and today we're going to be talking about living a life of faith and fulfillment. I'm delighted to welcome special guest Kevin Bjorklund. Kevin is a consultant at the Proctor Gallagher Institute and has dedicated himself to helping people live a life of purpose, mastering their mindset, and tapping into their full potential. You can reach Kevin at his website, Mindset Mastery, and I'll include a link in the description. Welcome, Kevin. I'm so glad that you could join with me today.
I'm so thankful for you having me on the podcast. I love this.
I am delighted on so many levels. I love talking about personal development, which you have studied for years, and that you have decided to give it a Christian twist. So I'm really curious about what your story is and why you got into personal development and why you felt that it needed to be kind of tailored to a more of a Christian audience.
Absolutely. Well, I always tell people, when I was very young, I grew up in the church. And so when I was around 4 or 5, I thought I wanted to be a pastor because, I thought they only worked on Sunday. And so I thought that was the best career choice. And then, later on, I worked in different areas of the church growing up, being on different teams, and I went on a missions trip. And that was when I was 13 to South Africa, and I saw amazing things as a young boy. 13 is so young to think about going to another country for
that is amazing.
A month. Yeah, and so I came back and was just my entire life, I had such a new perspective, obviously just seeing other cultures, seeing the world, but then experiencing some of the things that I experienced on that trip, seeing a person who was walking with a cane, no longer walking with a cane, kind of miracle moments. And then I really got into video production in high school, and so started doing that. And when I was around 25, all of those things came together. I began working for a ministry organization who we traveled all over the world. I was in Afghanistan, Egypt, Iraq, China, Burma, all over, and seeing the world, experiencing things. And I became consumed with, what leads people to actually living a fulfilled life. You would see people who had crazy circumstances and became very successful. Then you would see other people who had all the opportunity in the world and didn't become successful, and then trying to define that word success, and having so many different people, almost opposed to the idea of defining that word. And, some people define success in one way, and that means, minimizing their lifestyle. And then you see other people who try to define success, and it means getting all of this stuff and achieving all of these things. And so I just became, very consumed with what is success. And then when you add in or sprinkle in religion and, specifically for me, Christianity, and you have the broad spectrum within that. Some people think that success within, a certain religion, specifically Christianity, should be, that you're ultimately blessed, and blessed also includes material possessions. And then you have another spectrum of people who believe that success within that means having nothing and being fully alive and joyful without things. And anyways, I think that kind of gives an indicator of, okay, where do we even begin on defining success? And once we define it, how do we achieve it? And so I really loved stepping into this world of personal development and the pursuit for success within the Christian sphere, and trying to answer some of those questions for people who maybe became overwhelmed with the whole topic and the concept. And then hopefully what I wanted to do is get people beyond that point, and then start asking themselves, what do I want for my life and for my family and for the life that I want to live? And then how do I go about that and really see great results come from that? And so
is that your definition of success then? A more of a personal level, or do you have a definition of success that works for you?
I have adopted Earl Nightingale. He was, in the late 40s, early 50s, kind of the pioneer of audio personal development tools. Lloyd and Conant was his company, and he said that success is the progressive realization of a worthy ideal. And I think when you take those 9 words and you think about them for a while, okay, what does it mean? Success being for any individual person, the progressive realization of a worthy ideal. You start to establish, if you work backwards, okay, what is the worthy ideal? And a worthy ideal means that it has to benefit everyone who's involved. So if my goal doesn't take from others, it's probably a worthy ideal, or at least on track to being a worthy ideal. And then you start, breaking it down. Okay, the progressive realization, that would mean that I'm taking action every day, towards this worthy ideal. And so helping people identify, one, what is that? And I attribute that to goals. I think a person has to have purpose, they have to have vision, and they have to have goals to produce a worthy ideal, and then the confidence to go after that. And so, yeah, success to me is that definition of progressive realization of a worthy ideal.
That is fantastic. And it, like you said, there's a lot of meat in that simple statement. The idea, first of all, that it is a worthy, it's something that's worthy. For most people, success, and you mentioned there's lots of different ways of defining success, but I think for a majority of people, it's money, it's popularity, it's fame, it's power. And those are not necessarily, to my way of thinking, worthy ideals in and of themselves. Not that any of those things are bad, but just popularity for something frivolous is not as meaningful as something where it is an influence and a power for being good. And I love the idea of it being progressive, that is part of the success, because that means you can be successful on day one.
Yes.
You don't have to wait until you have accomplished the goal, the A, B, C, whatever those things are. But the moment that you set that goal, the moment that you take that first step, you're successful because you are progressing toward that worthy goal. That's a lot to think about. I really like that. Indeed.
Yeah. I think, you said a lot right there that is so good. And one thing that I really encourage people to do more, and maybe this comes more naturally to certain people, but to really, this sounds like a crazy statement, but to actually think, mental activity isn't necessarily thinking. And there's a quote I love, that 2% of people think, 3% of people think they think, and 95% of people would rather die than think. And, the person who said that, I'm spacing on who exactly said it. If someone Googles it, they'd find it pretty quick. And I think it's attributed to multiple people. But what they're saying is, when you listen to people talk, you start to identify what they think. And most people talk about what they don't like, what they don't want, why something can't happen. And you realize that they're putting a lot of mental energy into defeating themselves versus the same mental energy that could be applied to achieving or progressing towards the thing that they actually desire. And how many people, I've been guilty of this in the past, and this is why there does need to be accountability and all of that when going after goals. But getting into the trap of or the habit of thinking about the wrong things that actually do have a negative impact on the progressive realization of that worthy ideal. And what is the most sad thing, I think, is that often people are so caught in that trap that they never are able to get to the point of even defining the worthy ideal for themselves. There was a quote by the Dolphins coach, Don Shula. He said, "It's the start that stops most people." There's another quote by Robert Heinlein: "In the absence of clearly defined goals, we become strangely loyal to performing daily trivia until ultimately we become enslaved by it." And you see how many people are enslaved by daily trivia that's actually not taking them anywhere that they really want to go. It could be a job, it could be other things. Could just be, their phone or, social media platforms or whatever, but they're enslaved by it because they don't have a clearly defined goal, and they don't feel like they have time to define that goal because they're no time for it because they're doing all these other activities. And so to me, that's what motivates me so much is in really helping people, is getting people out of that trap of either negative thinking or defeated thinking, so that they can get to the point of identifying, you know what, this is actually what I do want. And for everybody, that's a different thing. So not assuming it's necessarily money or, a vacation somewhere or a home for somebody. But for a lot of people, it could be one of those three things, but the list is endless. And so helping people get to that point to actually defining, this is what I want. This is what I want. And I think once the one step further is helping people identify their purpose. Your purpose is so powerful, helping people find joy in their life. I think that's something that's so needed these days. And so within your purpose, you can establish various goals that gets the message to more people. But yeah, I think it's just great to be on a podcast that's so positive.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that very much. So would you recommend for people to get started to carve out some space and make some simplicity? I think a lot of times as we run on this kind of treadmill of life and we're moving forward and we're just doing what we're doing because that's what we do, we don't even think that there's any other way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I don't think that it's comfortable sometimes to be quiet. I think it's why people have a difficult time meditating. I think it's why a lot of people have difficult times just sitting and being still or journaling, is because there's familiarity with noise, and there's familiarity with busy, and busy isn't necessarily fruitful. So I think, the encouragement is take some time to sit, and it doesn't necessarily need to be quiet, although I think that does help. It could be with calming music, and helping people understand that anxiety, stress, hustle, bustle, that isn't fruitful ever. It never produces the results. The goal is to become, you can be in a hurry and be calm, or you can be moving fast through life and still be calm and have a calm mind. And so getting people to a place where they can calm down, where they can sit. But really the encouragement is asking people, and this is the difficult thing too, like I say it, and I know it's like when someone's going through something hard and someone says, hey, it's going to be okay. And it's really easy for the person saying it. It's very difficult for the person hearing it. Same thing here, where you're saying, okay, what I want you to do is I actually want you to just answer this question. What do you want? And you don't have to know how it's going to happen. Most people get into the trap of thinking, I need to know how I'm going to do something before I decide to do it. But that's not what anyone who went out and sought achievement that we experience on a daily basis did. For instance, President Kennedy asked scientist Wernher von Braun, what is it going to take for us to get to the moon, to create a rocket that's going to take us to the moon and bring us back safely? And he answered it in like less than 20 seconds. And in the most few words that you could imagine, he just said, the will to do it.
Wow.
So simple. He, very educated mind. He didn't get into all of the details. It hadn't been done before. But what he knew to be true was that whatever we put our mind to, it is possible. I mean, you reflect on the words of Jesus. Anything is possible to the person who believes. And that story is founded in Mark 9. There's other stories, but Mark 9, a guy comes up to him. Obviously, there's a lot of people who are getting healed. And so this guy has seen this. He's experienced it. And now his child is in a place of needing healing. And he comes up to Jesus and he says, if you're able, will you heal my child? And he says, what do you mean? Jesus replies back, what do you mean if I'm able? He goes, all things are possible, if you believe. And he said something really interesting. He goes, I do believe, but I need you to help my unbelief. And this really goes into, a lot of what I coach people is there's the conscious and the subconscious mind. The conscious mind is our ability to think. It's where we take all the information in. It's where our 6 higher faculties of the mind are: our perception, our imagination, our reason, memory, our will, and our intuition, and our imagination. And we use those mental tools to create the life that we want to live. If we don't use those tools, then whatever is going on around us, that is what goes into our subconscious mind. And our subconscious mind is like soil. The ideas that we give our subconscious, so the ideas from our conscious mind that go into our subconscious mind, are like seed going into soil. The soil doesn't reject seeds. It just produces whatever it's given. If it's given not a good seed, but let's say a vegetable, like corn, it's going to produce corn. But if you plant a poisonous weed, the soil doesn't care what you give it. It just produces it. So you can do both. Well, it's the same with the mind. And so helping people understand that what he was saying there was, he was saying you can believe on a conscious level. That's not going to do anything for you. It's when you believe on a subconscious level. And so getting people to that point of not just, thinking, but believing. And so that's really the process of getting someone to take action on their dream, is getting them to go from like, oh, I think that's possible, to I know that's going to happen. It's taking someone from wish to expectation.
That is amazing. So are these principles, as I'm hearing the echoes of Bob Proctor, is this the universal law? Is this what? Can you kind of explain what that is for people who are not familiar with it?
Absolutely. And I think a lot of people, especially people within the Christian world, don't easily accept this. And that's another motivation of finding this information in the Bible, for me, has been so helpful, because I think, you'll hear people talk about the universe. And the way I translate it, I don't get offended by that. I just think that, I just think people are talking about the God of the universe. If we believe that there was a creator, he created all things. And so if people are attributing certain elements of success to the universe, I think they're just one step away from the full truth, which is they're really attributing it to the creator of the universe. And so you have these universal laws, and laws are things that we can trust in to operate in the same way every time. So we know about the law of gravity. And then once we understood the law of lift, we understood that there was principles that were greater than the law of gravity that could allow someone to go into the air and stay in the air if we applied that law. And so you start getting these universal laws. You'll hear about the law of polarity, the law of relativity, the law of attraction. That's a big one out there.
Yeah, I'd like to talk about that one some more.
Yeah, absolutely. And so when you study Bob Proctor, he talks about, all these people talk about the law of attraction, but they miss the law of vibration. And the law of vibration is the primary law. And so without illustrations and diagrams, it can be a little bit difficult
to understand.
But I'll try to paint a picture. There was a Russian photographer who in the early 30s was able to develop a photography that captured the energy leaving a person's body. And so to take a step further back, when we go into the science, quantum physics, different things, you start to understand that everything is energy, and energy is never static. It's always in motion. And that motion, so everything being energy and then everything being in motion, we are in a constant state of vibration. The entire universe is in a constant state of vibration, and that being us as well. And you can get a picture of what this means is when you put someone who has deceased in the ground, and if they were to be uncovered in 1,000 years, you don't find them in the same state. They've decayed. And what caused that decay is the energy of that body vibrating and decaying apart. And so that's just an example of energy being in motion, always in a constant state of motion. Well, so what that Russian photographer found out was I can actually capture the energy leaving a person's body. And what they found out was that the energy would change in both color and in density depending on the state of the emotional state of that person. And so this enacts the law of attraction, that actually what we're doing when we change our emotional state is we're changing the energy that we're putting off, which actually changes the way that we act. But that energy is actually all the time attracting to it like energy. And so this is where you get like, man, why is everything bad happening to me? And you look at the emotional state of that person, and there's just an expectation. There is a force field of negative energy that based on the beliefs in their subconscious mind, and that is causing things to be attracted to them. Now, people have a really difficult time with this.
With the whole concept.
And the whole concept.
Right.
But as you start to look at it and you start to see and you start to evaluate your own life, it's a really simple formula.
And it's interesting how, I'm so sorry, how you see this in action. I remember a conversation with a gentleman, just a stranger I met, and he was talking about finances. He said, every single time I get some extra money, it always gets blown. There's something that needs to be fixed. Mm-hmm. There's something that happens. Somebody breaks a leg. He says, every single time. And I thought it was so interesting because I believe him that what he was saying was true, but that experience does not happen to every single person. So somehow that was something, I don't know if, as you want to put it, his energy, his message he was sending out is like, I do not want any extra funds. If I ever get any, make sure that there's a place for it to go because that's the way I roll. And so people, when you hear people say, oh, I always get sick or this always happens, they're usually right.
Yes. Yeah. And that is it's so powerful. It's also so scary. And it's interesting. There's a quote, there's an article on it, but the main part is that my mind is a center of divine operation. And you think, okay, there's only one center to something. And that's not true when you are in an infinite space. And so you think about humanity, human beings, all of us are the center of our own universe. Mm-hmm. And our mind is the center of divine operation. And so what God gave us is this ability to create, this ability to think. And the way that we think produces belief systems that could be also, defined as a paradigm. And that paradigm is that mental program. And so now the mental program controls our life. It controls the way we behave. It controls also the things that we attract to our life. And so anybody can change anything about their life if they can change their thoughts. And so the first step is understanding, okay, I wield the power. I'm not giving away power to other people, to life, to circumstances, to control what I think. And that's the biggest shift that people need to make. Oh, I actually don't have to allow, that goes back to that quote, 2% of people think, 3% of people think, they think 95% of people would rather die than think. Most people are saying, I am going to determine what I think about based on what happens to me or what's happening in the world. So they turn on the news and now they allow their thinking to be controlled by their senses. Instead of, and this is the polar opposite, this would be the law of polarity, that you can actually determine what you want to think and you can create that reality, and that is what will happen to you. That's what takes work. That's what takes discipline. That's what takes, studying and understanding these principles. But what you come to find out is, wow, it doesn't matter what's going on around me. I can actually control my life. I can't control initially, the things that are happening to me, but I can control what I do with that information and what I believe to be true. And and you see that, oh, there is a common thread to people who are successful. They're not lucky. They think in a very similar way. And so that's really these laws of success that I've become so interested in studying, because I truly believe that anyone can completely transform their life by completely transforming their mind.
That gives a sense of power and control. And power is a concept that's often misunderstood. I'm not talking about power over someone else, hierarchical power, but it is power over our own lives. It's the power to be able to be ourselves and to be able to kind of control, or at least have an influence in what takes place. And right now the world is uncertain. There's a lot of things that are going on, and a lot of people feel hopeless and they feel out of control. And if they can embrace these concepts, I think it gives us a feeling of some peace, because you feel a little bit like you're not quite that little bag being blown around in the wind, that you do have some part of it. Now, if it's okay, I'd like to go back to your quote on the thinking, about 2% thinking and 3% thinking they're thinking. I'm thinking that the definition of think is probably different than a lot of people are used to, because I bet everybody thinks that they're thinking. But as you're describing thinking, it's like original thought, something that's coming from you, not something that's being parroted or something that's being cycled around and around. It's different. It is a creative type of process, rather than because a lot of people worry. They think that's thinking, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly. No, you're exactly right. And so thinking is not mental activity. I would equate thinking in this regard to you're in control of the thoughts, you're generating the thoughts. And so what I mean by that is you're using, instead of using your senses, so what you're seeing, what you're hearing, what is going on around you, what you're hearing, you're now utilizing or tapping into those 6 higher faculties. And so again, I'll repeat those. So you've got your imagination. This is your creative faculty to think anything. And the cool thing about this is I can say, think about your house when you were 10 years old. And a person could close their eyes and they can walk through their house vividly, with a picture in their mind. And that's because we think in pictures, and they can count the number of windows that were in their house. That's the imagination. And you can do that with things that have been unseen. I could say, create a planet that you think would be really cool. And you could, paint this picture of a planet, and you could create all these, and every single person would have a different picture. That's the imagination. Then you've got your intuition. Your intuition is your ability to receive frequencies. Okay, so that could be confusing, but basically we say that prayer is us talking to God. Our intuition is our ability to hear God, is our ability to receive God. People will say, I sensed, or I felt, or I heard God say. They're saying, I didn't hear something audible, but I know that this wasn't me that created this thought. It was like placed there. That's our intuition, is our ability to perceive the unseen frequencies. And I believe it is frequency. And so you've got your perception. That's your ability to see things in a different way. So I can perceive something this way, and someone else can perceive the exact same situation in a completely different way. And the results that they produce in their life are miles apart, and yet it was the same instance. Our reasoning factors, our ability to think. And so when I say think, it's more of a curious thing. Thinking, and I guess we could define it this way, thinking isn't just taking what I hear, taking what I see, and accepting their interpretation. That could be a newscaster or someone else, their interpretation of what this means. It's me thinking, that's my reasoning factor, saying, okay, this person sees it this way, and this, what do I think about this, and why do I think about this? And that I think is taking people, before they make a conclusion, about something, thinking about it. You've got your memory, and perception and memory are two mental faculties that go really powerfully together. Wayne Dyer said this, when you change the way that you look at something, the thing that you look at changes. And so people can't change their past, but they can change the meaning of their past. Anybody can go back, and this is the law of polarity. Everything has its equal and its opposite. Anything that's really, really good can also be really, really bad. You look at, there's a documentary called The Social Network, or The Social Dilemma on Netflix.
I've seen that.
Social media can be fantastic. Look at what we're doing here. You're creating a podcast that's spreading joy. Equally, there's people who are using, the internet or social media to do horrible things. And that is the law of polarity. And so when you look back on your past and something that you attributed to a very dark moment, and you start to inspect it and you say, what was the good that actually came of that? Or what good could come of that? You can actually change the meaning of the past to benefit you today and into your future. A big part of that comes down to forgiveness, but those tools or those mental faculties are so powerful together. I think we touched on them, but that's what I'm saying. When you look at, 2% of people are doing that. 2% of people are saying, I'm in control, and I'm going to start taking the advantage. I'm going to start taking offense. What do I want for my life? Are the ideas that I'm thinking about serving me in my future, or are they robbing from me? And that's where you get to, thinking is not just mental activity. Thinking is not just accepting things the way that they are for somebody else. It's using those higher faculties together to create the life that you really, really desire. And that's where it becomes life is exciting. Yeah, it's a jungle out there. It can be crazy. It can be filled with very hurtful and hard and painful and dark moments. But when you start to understand the power that you have in your ability to control your thoughts and discipline your mind, life becomes really exciting.
That's wonderful. Life should be exciting. It should be something that we are joyful about, instead of just running that treadmill and going from day to day. So that's beautiful. Thank you. You've given a lot of things to think about today. So if people want to know more, I guess they can go to your website and learn some more there. And thank you so much for visiting with me today.
It's a pleasure. Well, thank you for all that you do. Thank you for the joy that you spread. I heard one of your podcasts, you talked about your guest and just how bright of a smile she had. And I think you have the same ability with your smile to equally, just with your words, but with your smile, spread joy. And so hopefully all the people who are following you take that advice and just smile more.
Isn't that a simple thing that we can do that can make a difference?
Yeah.
It's kind
of for others and for you yourself.
Win-win gift. Totally a win-win gift.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you again for having me and doing what you're doing.
Oh, it's a pleasure. In closing, I'd like to share a quote by personal development leader Bob Proctor. He said, "Change is inevitable, but personal growth is a choice." Today, I invite you to do one thing that brings you personal growth. See you next time on Linda's Corner.